Welcome to the LDHR Podcast, where ministry leaders grow together. Over the next few months, we will be releasing episodes intermittently alongside our other series to talk about growing on purpose, highlighting the people and pathways for growing where you are and with what you've been entrusted. Through these episodes, you'll hear from people with insights and practical steps that you can apply right away. You'll also have the opportunity to find out more about the resources that are available to you and how you can intentionally grow on purpose wherever God has you. Come on in and listen. We're so glad you're here. Well, welcome to the LDHR Podcast. Today's episode is a really special one. We're joined by three experts in the Birkman Method: Mark McGowan, Cy Farmer, and Erin Layne. Welcome to the LDHR Podcast. I'm really happy that each of you are here with me today. I'd love for each of you to just maybe take a minute and introduce yourselves and kind of share your connection with Crew and with the Birkman.
Great. This is Erin Layne. I've been on Crew staff since '88. So that dates me. And I was certified as a Birkman consultant in 2001 and then became a trainer maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So I've been using the Birkman ever since then. I've served in the States and then over in former Soviet Union for 3 years, 91 to 94, and then returned to work with HR. Well, I was getting my counseling degree at Denver Seminary while I worked on campuses in the Denver area, worked for a few more years there, and then moved to an HR staff care leadership development role.
Fantastic. Welcome, Erin.
Okay, Cy Farmer, my wife and I joined staff in 1973, the year after Expo 72. So we've been around a while. We have white hair. We're old, but we think young. And Birkman has helped us do that because we get to do Birkmans with a lot of young staff. And I just love the whole process. Of course, I've always loved people. And the reason I got into Birkman, I was trying other diagnostics, the classic ones, DISC, Myers-Briggs, and all those. I even tried to write one of my own. I called the Personal Satisfaction Survey, but it was heavy, untested, so I threw that out the window. But when Birkman came along, I figured, I just love Birkman.
Great. Welcome, Cy.
And I'm Mark McGowan. I joined staff in 2009. I served in various roles in East Asia with Leader Impact, with high school ministry, and then left East Asia and then joined the global BP LDHR team. And I left staff. I'm now affiliate staff with Crew to now work for Birkman. So my role at Birkman is helping Birkman certified professionals in many different forms of industry, from nonprofits to Fortune 500 companies, be successful in implementing Birkman and helping Birkman solve the problems that they have within their workplace.
Amazing. Welcome, Mark. That's great. So for those who may not be familiar, how would you describe the Birkman Method? What are we talking about it? And if you haven't shared, what first drew you to it personally?
Well, I'll jump off because obviously Erin will share her ideas, but Mark's got deep expertise in it now because he works there. But basically, Birkman measures underlying needs. There's virtually no other tool that does exactly the same way. Mark can give more precise explanation of that. But needs is what you need from your environment and others to feel satisfied. And it just captivated my attention. And I found it so helpful. I've also found, and I think Mark and Erin will agree with this, Birkman basically is a lifelong report. Unless you go through some major trauma in your life, Birkman doesn't really encourage you to take the questionnaire more than once if you're satisfied with it. So I just love the tool, and I found it extremely helpful. As a matter of fact, we were in France for a number of years, and doing it with about 40 French staff, the most common refrain was, "I cannot believe how accurate this is."
I'd say also it shows the needs, and it's the only assessment that uncovers those invisible needs for us. But it is a strengths-based assessment, and it gives us both the opportunity to understand ourselves more deeply and to be able to understand others in different ways as well. So it's validated really by our perceptions of others. It's the only assessment that has both relational and career occupational observations in the same assessment. And what drew me to it as I began to work in HR, I got my counseling degree to go deeper in discipleship. And I felt like this tool, more than any I'd ever seen, could really help me coach our staff. I started working and doing the Birkman with every new staff, which gave us opportunities to put action points on their PDPs, their personal development plans,
Right.
right as they were in the height of MPD, Ministry Partner Development. So a lot of stress came out. The Birkman shows us these stress reactions and gives a prescription for how to get out of our stress. So that was huge. And then as I began doing team buildings in our region, former region, it really provided a common developmental language for us to be able to understand each other's strengths and respect them, to come from an objective, positive perspective. And it really changed the way we thought about ourselves as we were able to implement that regionally here. So I also learned that it has biblical underpinnings. And that was huge for me to realize that Dr. Birkman was a deeply evangelical believer. He's with the Lord now, but it was based on the Beatitudes. And there are other underpinnings that come out as we train our staff. And that's really exciting for me to be able to help relay those underpinnings to people.
And just to add, one of the things that Birkman does really well is it challenges assumptions that we make a lot about ourselves, because a lot of assumptions are that, for instance, the way I communicate about myself, I want that in return. But Birkman challenges that assumptions by looking at what do we expect. And as Saya talked about, the needs that we have and the expectations. Because a lot of times when we forming a new team or we're meeting one-on-one with someone, we're trying to figure out what's the best way to communicate with this person. What's the best way to incentivize this person? What's the best way to lead this person? So we're looking at a scale of maybe 1 to 99, and we're trying to figure out where does that land? And when we look at Birkman, we could say, that lands actually as a 79, or that lands in this area, and we can start there. And it actually decreases the time that it takes for someone to learn. And so it can take a team forming together, go from 18 months down to 6 months as part of what they're doing. And so that really is a draw to Birkman, because it's not really telling you any information that you're not already trying to figure out. It just gives you that information, helps you get to the conclusions faster.
That makes sense. So you've already mentioned a few other personality and assessment tools. There really are a lot out there. What do you think really makes Birkman distinct in how it helps people understand themselves and others?
Well, I think that there are a couple things that Birkman does that sets it apart. As Erin mentioned, the career piece, the comprehensive piece of Birkman by adding career is something that you don't get in any other assessment as comprehensive. You make him put together a series of assessments to get there. So the depth and complexity of Birkman is a strength. But I think what it really does well, it's built around perception and expectation, not just self-description. So it's not just describing how you show up or who you are, but a foundational piece is how Birkman interprets how you see most people and the social environment that you expect around you. Because we believe at Birkman that our behavior is strongly shaped by meaning, not just circumstance. And so I can say that I show up this way, and I can say that, and I can show up that way and really work hard at showing up that way. But that's just me trying to show up a certain way. That may not be the true me. And so Birkman, when you look at the needs and expectations, actually dives into our true self, which is looking at the expectations of how we see other people. And we believe that may be a more accurate perception of who we are.
Mm-hmm. I think we could also say human behavior is basically universal. Culture can have an impact on that behavior and sometimes dictate changes in that behavior for the societal rules or whatever it might be. We have about 24 languages. And the point is that even though a lot of the people doing Birkman may not be able to communicate in the same language, when they talk about behavior, they find many, many things in common because basically human behavior is universal.
One of the things that I really like about Birkman is it's comparable, in that we can begin to see that if I am this and you are that, I may be more of something than someone else. And so we do ask people to go, hey, go see how you compare to someone else, because that really begins to show the difference. So it's not just a narrative that Birkman gives you, but it actually gives you a way to look at how different and how similar that we are to other people in multiple ways, and how similar we are in our motivations, how similar are we in our strengths, how similar are we in our expectations of the world. And so it really gives that depth in those areas that Birkman really shines in its complexity.
What I'm hearing you say is it's very comprehensive, that it covers a lot of different aspects.
I often say Birkman's a deep well. You can get a lot out of your first exposure, but you can keep going back to it and finding little nuggets that keep coming up. Oh, wow, I hadn't seen that before. And that's really helpful to me in the situation I'm right now. So I love it for that.
That's really helpful. So the Birkman, when we're talking about it, it uses a color framework that maybe can feel a little bit complex at first. Can you just walk us kind of through the colors in a way that helps people quickly grasp what they represent?
Okay, well, I'll do the basic, then Mark and Erin maybe can elaborate on it. Basically, the four colors are red, green, blue, and yellow. Red are the doers, green are the communicators, blue are the thinkers, and yellow are the organizers, or what was the word you had yesterday, Erin? For yellow?
Analyzers.
Analyzer, yeah. That's the basic of the meanings, but we go far beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, the color framework, first of all, for people who took questionnaire before 2016, there is a new Birkman signature report. So most people are familiar with that now. Most people have gotten their new updated report, but the signature report has really simplified what felt complex before. So that's helpful. It's much more user friendly to just read through it. But those colors, the framework is in a square, but it's actually a pyramid. It goes up. And so we can see differing degrees of each of those colors in how we show up in our motivations or interests. And then also our strengths, which are our usual behaviors, and our needs and stress behaviors. So it's a way to put us each on the map in one place. And it has a lot of implications for that comparative piece. So when we do team buildings, we'll all stand in a square and we'll see those differences because it's like, oh, I'm over here in the blue. I'm a thinker. I'm an idea person. And you're up there in the red. You're the doer. You're the one who follows through and implements a lot of my ideas. And we really need each other. So I think the color framework really simplifies things, frankly. But Sai gave a great overview of what each of those colors represents.
Maps, when we use maps in the real world, tells us I am here and I want to go somewhere else. And it gives us basic directions of how to get there. It doesn't give us a complete description. So when we get there, sometimes we go, I think I'm here. The number matches, but it may not be what we think when we see the details of when we arrive there. Yeah, when we look at the colors, especially in the map. And so the map gives us that really high level view of who we are. And from that high level view, it allows us to go, oh, I am this and you are that. Cool. What are our differences? Where do we align? Where do we not align? And so it begins to create that conversation about where we're similar, where we're different. And so I think when we look at that in the different dimensions, that helps us begin to go, oh, wow, there are some differences here. And then as Birkman goes into the rest of our signature, we can begin to see what are some of those differences specifically, or what are some of those similarities that we can dive into. So it does give you the details once you begin the conversation by looking at the map and giving you a color, as you had mentioned with the 4-color framework.
One thought is that, Crew tends to be a very blue-green organization, which you can imagine, Beth, because we are communicators and we are idea people trying to figure out how can we reach the world in new and different ways, et cetera. But we all need those yellow-red people, and there are quite a few yellow and red people. But when we see our team all together, if we don't have the red and yellow present, then we need to figure out how to meet some of those red and yellow needs. How do we take care of those tasks that are red and yellow in our team? So it gives really practical implications, as well as helping people figure out, well, I'm in it for the gospel and seeing the world reach for Christ. But I realize after being on campus staff that I am more analytical. That's really my jam. That's where I would like to work more often. And they can find a more effective niche for themselves by moving into a more yellow or red position.
That's really a helpful explanation from even that bigger picture, Mark, you said of like it being a map. Like, where are we? Where are we going? Where are the other people on the map? I really like that picture. That's really helpful for me in understanding it. Birkman, I think you said, looks at different things. It looks at our interests, it looks at our needs, our usual behavior, and our stress behavior. How would you explain each of those in everyday terms, and what exactly do they mean?
I'll start off. Interest is our basic motivation. What grabs you? What keeps you up at night, or the things that you gravitate? And I'll give you a personal example. I was a Minnesota farm boy. So when I went to college, I met with my advisor. I said, what should I major in? He said, well, you're good in math. So major in math, minor in physics. So I did that. And I taught math and physics for 6 years, but I didn't want to spend the rest of my life grading math papers because it graded my nerves. No, basically, I'm a people person. And when Birkman and things like that came along, I love helping people become all that just God's intended them to be. And so that's the interest part of it. Then I'll just go quickly. Now, usual behaviors are strengths. That's when we're at our best. Everything's going well, sun's shining, sky's blue, things are going well. But then we look at underlying needs, what has to take place in our environment or interaction with other people that helps us feel satisfied in the situation we're in. And then stress takes place when those needs are not met. And Erin and
The way I describe people is the interest also. So it's motivations. In other words, it's the passions that God has put on our hearts to differing degrees. There are motivators as well as demotivators, the lower numbers. Like Sai said, we usually show up in our usual behavior. And I think we're all amazed as we go through report after report how differently we show up, even if our numbers are very similar. But I look at that as how we reflect God's glory in a very unique way, how He's put us together to reflect Him very uniquely. And then, like Sai said, the needs are what we need in order to show up in that strength. And then the stress behavior is what occurs when we don't have those needs met. Depending on our maturity and our self-awareness, the more aware we are, then we can keep ourselves from moving in that stress behavior and hang out and wait on God, really, which is how Dr. Birkman describes it. That's walking in the power of the Holy Spirit, is waiting on God to meet our need so that we can continue on in our usual behavior and we don't have to move into that stress behavior. But that takes quite a bit of self-awareness and maturity.
Right.
Yeah, I think the only thing to add to that, it would just be when we hear the word stress behavior, it's not that it's just an instant reaction to something that we don't like. It's something that we built up. We create a tolerance for. Not everybody can meet our needs. And that's just a reality of any relationship, any team leader, any work relationship that we have. And so we build up a tolerance for, hey, these expectations aren't getting met here, and that's okay. But over time, it can definitely build, and we could begin to see that stress behavior come out. And that's that reaction to, hey, this is not happening over a period of time. Almost like the warning light in your car when it comes on, is that, when that comes on, it draws our attention. And a lot of times we don't even think about our needs until something does happen. When the warning light on our car, that's when I start thinking about I might need to get my car fixed. And I think that's where Birkman begins to shine. It's just beginning to show some of those visible things that when they show up, we need to take note of that. And we need to figure out, what do we need to do? What's going on?
I resonate a lot with that, those warning lights of it's like we don't think about them until there is something that gets our attention. And when we know what those things are, they can be a very clear indicator of what we need to do instead of, I'm just acting like this, but knowing what those are and seeing them in a clearer way. So beyond these core areas, what are some of the deeper insights people gain about themselves through the Birkman?
I'll give you a quick one. I'm going to be doing a team up in Michigan here in a few weeks, and then talking to the team leader. And on his component, social energy, he's very high in usual behavior and very low in need. And he realized he always thought of himself as an extrovert, using the Myers-Briggs terminology. And he is basically, quotes, when his needs are met. He's an extrovert. But he realized he needs a lot of time by himself so he can spend time with people. And so that for him, that was a real aha experience for him.
Mm.
I think also we tend to see how our own needs, which are, like I said before, invisible, our usual behavior is visible, our strength is visible, so people around us see those strengths and can validate those. Our needs are not visible. Those are some of the deepest insights we gain, are those needs, because the Birkman makes them visible. And then our stress reactions, again, are visible. People can see when we're in stress in that area, this is what it looks like. But we can also see who on a team, for example, tends to meet our needs through their usual behavior. It really elucidates why we gravitate towards some people to share deeper things, et cetera, and for different reasons. But it can also show us, and one thing we do during team buildings is we like for people to volunteer their strengths to help meet the needs of other people, and also volunteer their interests to help balance out the team. So we're getting a lot of ideas about how we can work more effectively together as a team, how we can meet our objectives more efficiently and effectively, et cetera. There are also all kinds of reports that we can give people, coaching reports. It's insightful to see our own coaching report, to understand what we need in someone who coaches us so that we can share with them, these are things that would be helpful, not from a demanding perspective, because we don't demand that our needs are met. We trust the Lord to meet them, but it's helpful to mention them and to bring them up so other people can see them.
That sounds super helpful. I think sometimes it's hard to articulate those, and having that can be very helpful to say, these are some of my needs. And like you said, not to demand, but to enter into that relationship together.
I think one of the other things that Berkman can help is in development. So a deeper thing would be that not all of our behaviors are effective in every situation. So they might be a strength, but are they being effective? And I think that's a good question that Berkman asks is, my usual behavior, which I'm supposed to be my most effective behavior, is it being effective? You can look at it in this way. Am I using the right tool for the right job? And so Berkman can be used as development, and not saying that I should develop into somebody different, but saying, is there a way that I could be more effective in certain situations by being more direct and finding a way just to move the needle a little bit more in the direct way? And so I think that's a good, deeper insight that Berkman can help, because a lot of times we assume that I can just rely on my strengths, and that's not the case in every situation.
That's a great point, Mark. We talk about it in terms of borrowing behavior.
Right.
If our strength is a lower strength, but in certain situations, a higher strength in that area is necessary, then we have to learn what it would look like to borrow some behavior in that area in order to be more effective in whatever situation.
Yeah.
Building on that, and even kind of going to what you shared, Sai, when you're debriefing someone, are there some kind of common or really powerful aha moments that you tend to see as someone is going through their Berkman?
Yeah, just like I just mentioned the example I gave. My wife and I joke, we said if we did the Berkman before we got married, maybe we would never gotten married. But because the Berkman, we're still married. We are quite different, but the old adage, opposites attract. But the Berkman has helped my wife and I really understand each other much better. And I'm more on the green side of things, and my wife is a triple blue, and she needs time to think. And I realized I have to adapt my communication style to stop and listen rather than just expect an immediate response. So that's been an aha experience for myself.
It's helpful for me too, Sai, being on a team with you, that you stop and listen. I mean, it helps us not just in marriage, but that certainly helps us all the way
Yeah.
around.
Just adding on to what some of the aha moments that I've seen Sai is talking about is that, a lot of times people, when they take an assessment and they get a report and it says that that we focus, and sometimes we pigeonhole people into that. And we don't necessarily point out of how valuable that is. So, and some people look down upon someone says, oh, you are this, and then that could be a bad thing. I think one of the aha moments that Berkman does is help present that what you bring to the table and who you are and your personality actually is valuable to the team that you're on, to the relationships, and your perspective matters. And so a lot of people have aha moments when they realize, yes, it might be different than the rest of the team, your perspective, but my perspective does matter. And there are advantages and figuring out how a team can leverage, or how I can leverage my perspective in a world that might be different, that might see the world very differently. And I think that's a big aha moment that a lot of people have when they have conversations is seeing the value that they bring with their perspective.
I love that.
Yeah. Another thought, Beth, is big aha moments when we talk about people's interests and giving people permission to make sure that those highest interests are incorporated in their lives and work. But if not in their work, for example, artistic, musical, literary, for some people, if they're on campus staff, they might feel like, well, I don't really get to use that very often. But there are ways to use it in our personal lives. If our motivators or interests are a 90 or above, it's not only an area of interest, but an area of need. So I've been working with a couple who are in their early 50s, they're in HR and looking for their next placement and positions in life, whether it's with crew or outside. And we've certainly found plenty of things within crew, but the woman in particular has these motivators that are needs as well in her lives. And it's really changed her life to incorporate this artistic and musical pieces on a daily, weekly basis to just help her feel more satisfied in life so that she can show up in her job more effectively. And then we're also talking through how she can serve in a way that's most fulfilling for her, that uses her strengths, that doesn't necessarily, we talk about that 80-20 rule that Steve Douglas gave us so long ago, that as long as we're doing the things we love 80% of the time, we want people to not be working in their demotivators. And we can help them see that, even though we are all responsible for some demotivators in life. Like if we're not administrative, we still have to do taxes, for example, or all of the admin that we do have to work through for campus staff. But as long as it's not a huge portion of our job.
That really resonates with me. One of my aha moments when I did the Birkman was that my interests lied a lot in the artistic and musical. And that kind of surprised me, but it did give me permission to incorporate that more in my life. Even though I don't feel like I'm particularly gifted, I do find a lot of joy and interest in it.
We don't measure skill in our interest and motivation. It is about motivation. So
right.
I would just add to that, like one of the things that Birkman gives is when you start looking at the needs and how you see your needs and your expectations, really giving you some permissions to take some time for yourself. A lot of times in ministry, we push ourselves forward and say, oh, I don't need to slow down. Oh, I don't need to stop. Oh, I don't need some time alone. What we find with Birkman is that if we don't give ourselves that permission, we don't actually show up as our best self. We don't show up in the way and the strength that we can be most effective in certain situations. And so some of the aha moments that people have is like, I really have been most effective when I've slowed down or when I took control of my schedule, not doing nothing, but I'm actually saying no when my schedule's too full or reprioritizing what I need to do or taking some time to think. And that really helps people be better. And it helps them really understand. It helps them show up better. And I think that's one of the big aha moments is giving people permission to do that. For me, one of my big aha moments was if you make me sit in front of a computer for 5 hours a day, I get very restless and actually become unproductive. But if I could do that in short spurts, I can actually be more productive in doing it in short spurts than if you make me sit down and focus on one thing for a really long time. And so that's just one of the things that helped me on staff is give myself permission when I was working from home to walk around the house periodically, to go for a walk, or to do those things that allowed me to be able to refocus and be able to be more productive.
That makes a lot of sense. We've already talked about it a little bit, but let's just dive in a little deeper. How can Birkman be especially helpful for someone trying to grow personally? But then how does it also become a powerful tool for leaders working with a team?
As previously mentioned, I think it helps us to learn to name our needs and to really take ownership and agency for what our needs are, because no one is going to meet our needs. No team, no person, no spouse, nobody's going to meet our needs in the world. So it's up to us to take agency of what that means. So it's up to us to figure out what that means and what that looks like for us. If you're really struggling, like really helping identify what need is not being met, what expectation that I had of how things should go is not being met, and begin to work on how could I then reframe that expectation to be in a place that could get met. It helps me to then able to act in my strength behavior. I think that's a key piece to that too, is also just learning to spot our stress behavior early, and to spot, oh yeah, there's something not right. Well, what is that stress behavior? What is it trying to tell me? What is that warning light trying to say? Because if we don't spot it early, the problem is it begins to go into a spiral and it can only get worse and worse. So for instance, if we begin to feel fatigued, well, what is it that's causing us fatigue? Because we don't want to stay fatigued and continue down this track where it might even lead to burnout. So we want to identify that stress behavior early. And I think as a leader, one of the things that it can do is just really help you understand people and have more compassion for those that you lead, because it helps you understand people who are different than you are. And so it helps you go, oh, they actually need this. So how can I be more empathetic, or how can I be communicate in a way that's different? And so you begin to have more compassion for the people because you realize, hey, they need something and I'm going to really try to work at it. And so it helps you be a better leader, but it also helps you have more compassion for the people that you lead.
I would add to that, or just a personal example. I had a leader who was reaching out to us to have her Birkman done, and I did that. And it became obvious she had stepped back out of team leader role and was on sabbatical and had some areas of personal growth that she wanted to mature in. She was not going to return to that team leader position. And, we're always trying to discern as we're talking with people, where it's not just us, but asking the Holy Spirit to really help us to see this person and lead us, in these pathways of growth. And it became apparent to me that she has such leader qualities, but didn't feel confident in her ability to lead. And I able to offer her ongoing mentoring if she decided to move back into that role. And I mentioned some reasons why, I thought that could be a great situation for her, but also offered to do individual Birkmans with the people on her team, as well as to do a team building with her team, which would give her this interaction where they're developing this common language and seeing each other. Like Mark said, we can have more compassion with one another. We can see their needs and not try to meet them necessarily blindly. We can be more conscientious in helping to meet their needs or connecting them with someone on the team or outside of the team who can help meet those needs. And it just was a sweet year of walking with her and seeing her grow as she really made a lot of strides in both the personal growth areas that Mark mentioned, naming her needs without apology, being able to spot stress early and manage it effectively. And then also as she was able to lead the leaders on her team more effectively and to give them language that would help them see the strengths in one another objectively as positive things and not negative things, because some of them didn't tend to meet their own needs. We can do that. We can judge people by thinking negatively of them if they don't tend to meet my needs. And that's pretty self-centered. So we can look outwardly and be more effective.
I'll throw an idea here. When we are working in our area of strength, it's wonderful. But when we look at interests, we also look at skills. And for example, I'm skilled in mathematics. I majored in mathematics. What I enjoyed about teaching math was the interaction with the students. And so the idea is that when we look at our interest, if we can kind of reframe what we're doing in terms of our interest. For example, if we're doing a yellow task, an administrative task, we might be good at it, but our real interest is people, is on the green side, helping people. When we're doing these administrative tasks, rather than just thinking about the actual task itself, I'm doing this because it's helping people. So it's kind of reframing the task in terms of our high motivations.
It sounds like taking a yellow thing, but wearing green glasses
Exactly.
to do it.
Exactly. Right.
You get it.
So in ministry settings, where we're talking a lot about, and you guys have given some really great example, we know that time, energy, people are often stretched. How have you seen Birkman really then help leaders steward their teams more thoughtfully? You've talked about compassion, but could you give a few other examples of how that has worked?
I think a big piece just is looking at preventing burnout. I think that's a big piece in what Birkman can help us do, because it helps us understand what's our pace. By looking at the component of physical energy, we can see, well, what kind of pace do we expect? I mean, when we say pace, and it's not like one person runs really fast and the other people don't do anything, but it's the amount of the things that you put into your schedule and how much it takes to sustain that. And so I think one of the things that Birkman helps us do is to understand that, everybody's busy and ministry's always going to be busy and there's always going to be more ask of our time. It never stops. But how can we maintain our schedule and pace at a way that helps us continue and be successful in the long term and not be successful in the short term, but then not last because we haven't set the right pace for what we need to do. I think too, it also helps us with our social time, because a lot of people they appear very social, but they don't have the same expectations and needs of the world. And with the role of being in ministry, a lot of times there's high demands that we are social a lot, that we are interacting with people, that we're having to create conversation, have small talk with people to interact. I think understanding what does it take for me to be that by looking at your needs can really help someone understand and be the best. Because when we're a meeting of students, we want to make sure that we're at our best and able to interact and not wanting to pull away from that meeting because we don't have any energy and able to do that. So I think when we look at Birkman helps us understand those two things. I think that really helps. Those are just two examples of how I could see Birkman being used in a ministry context.
That's great. And I think it's also coming back to that team perspective instead of being just the self-centered perspective of like, what pace are we going to run at? It's not just me personally, but even as a leader, like, what's the pace of my team? That's going to be us thriving together. That's really helpful.
And that was one of the things that I've seen in working with a team when I was on staff with Crew, is that we had a leader who was running at a very fast pace, and the rest of his team, he couldn't project his pace onto the rest of the team because the rest of his team couldn't keep up. So the conversation that we had as a team was, we need to make sure that he is running at his pace, and we let him go. We let him run at his pace and keep going, but we're checking in on him to make sure he hasn't fallen off the cliff, because eventually no one has an unlimited supply of energy. He just can go longer at a faster pace than other people, but making sure that the other people on the team are still able to accomplish what they need to accomplish, the ministry goals and the things that we're set out, but at a pace that's more sustainable for them. And so the big aha moment was, let's talk about that. Because as a leader, you can't implement your pace on everyone else because it may not make them successful.
That's so helpful. Well, whether or not someone has taken the Birkman, what's one mindset shift you'd want every listener to walk away with about how they interpret their own behavior and the behavior of others?
We can assume behavior is data. It's not a verdict. When you see someone's reaction, don't judge them. Don't jump to a character judgment. Birkman helps us begin to reframe that. When we see someone's reaction, we may say, what might they be needing that they're not getting? We could ask, what story might they be telling themselves now? Because it could be not a reaction to something. It could be something that's going on inside of them. Maybe we ask them maybe what strength that they're trying to use that may not be the right strength. They may be overusing that strength, the wrong tool for the wrong job. Because just this not judging people, but beginning to understand people. And it's just giving us an ability to dive deeper into what that looks like. Birkman gives us the data. It's not a judgment. It's not a verdict. It just gives us the data on where we can go and to ask deeper questions and probe more into what's going on.
Yeah, I agree, Mark. That's a great phrase. Assume behavior is data, not a verdict. And also, as we're talking to people, whether it's individually or within a team, again, people might have a similar number, quote unquote, for a need. But we're asking them, what does that look like for you? And it might look completely different, but there will be some characteristics that will be similar within it. But I'm going to ask, well, what would it look like to meet your need? Because if I'm within 20 points of behavior, for example, if I show up in my usual strength, which is my usual, then if your need is within 20 points, I can meet that every day without really thinking about it. So that's helpful to understand. But if I'm, say, 60 points away from meeting your need and how I show up every day, I can meet that on a one-off, but I can't sustain it. But I really need to know what that would look like for you. And again, maybe other people on the team meet that on a daily basis and more regularly. But I want to help, because if we're on a team together, to be honest, we love one another. That's our calling. And that makes us effective in even our love for one another will make us more effective in seeing the gospel reach others. Then I want to know what it would look like to love you more effectively. And I can do that on a one-off. So it gives us helpful footholds, handholds on that climbing wall to really be able to work more effectively together as a team.
And I think the key to that is what Erin's talking about, is that it really is about curiosity. Like, we have to remain curious about other people, because if curiosity leads to, us asking questions and wanting to build that connection with people, from that connection, we can actually build those deeper relationships. But it all starts with us being curious, and asking those questions and not jumping straight to judgment, because that would never lead to relationships when we have judgment. But if we have that curiosity at the beginning, that does lead to those connections. And everybody wants those deep connections, but it starts with us being curious and continue to ask questions.
I think having that phrase in my mind is helpful, to say that behavior is data, not a verdict. I think would allow me to be more curious when someone acts a certain way, to say, I wonder, what has caused this? What needs are not being met, or what's behind that, instead of saying, this means this person is exactly like this.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So how can our listeners find out more about the Birkman if they would like to dive in deeper?
Well, they can email us. Our email address is berkman@crew.org. And one of the team will pick it up and can send an authorization or respond with them if they've got questions. But if they actually want to go ahead in the process and do the Birkman, then we can authorize a questionnaire for them. Birkman sends them an email, and they can go through the process. You have anything to add to that, Erin?
Well, also for those, we have 180 Birkman certified professionals all over the globe. Some use it as a developmental tool with every new staff that comes on. Others use it as needed. But we are also set up trainings annually, typically, where we can train people to be Birkman certified professionals.
Thank you. We'll make sure we write that email in our show notes so people can easily find it. But Cy, Erin, and Mark, thank you so much for joining me today and talking about the Birkman. This has been really great and insightful. So thank you so much for your time. What's been your experience with the Birkman? One of my biggest takeaways from today's conversation is that behavior is data, not a verdict, And that invites me to stay curious about others. What challenged you today? And what's one step you can take to grow on purpose, both personally and as part of a team? If you've enjoyed this episode, please like it and share it with a friend. And be sure to subscribe. We've got some great content coming your way. I hope you keep growing on purpose, and I'll see you next time.